Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from the Zac Brown Band called Welcome Home. So to explain why this album actually exists, we need to go back a couple of years. It's 2015, and anticipation was high for the newest album from the Zac Brown Band. But of course there were concerns. Everybody knew the band was capable of delivering real quality. Even if they had a penchant for laid-back beach fare, they'd still put out 3 remarkably solid albums with great melodies and harmonies and lyrics that, while not exactly great, could hit some real potent emotions. And for me personally, they've been responsible for some of the best mainstream country songs in recent years. Hell, their 2012 album, M-Cage, was fantastic. Would have been one of my favorite records of that year. A beacon of real talent in an increasingly oversaturated bro country scene. But the lead-off singles, it seemed, well, different, increasingly stepping outside country in favor of rock or pop, and yet little did we expect what Jekyll and Hyde turned out to be. Putting it simply, despite how much I like that album, and I do, it was a mess, full of stylistic pivots into rock, metal, reggae, EDM, and even occasionally country music. And again, there were some great moments. Zac Brown has a knack for hooks like few others in mainstream country, but the pileup of genres alienated a lot of the group's fans, especially those who had followed from their looser, more southern rock-driven jam band roots. And again, even though I did like that album and think their experimentation did occasionally stick the landing, I hold Tomorrow Never Comes is as close to a country EDM crossover that actually works really well that's ever been made. And yeah, the rock-leaning tracks definitely have their fans, but for a lot of hardcore country fans, it was a step too far. And so, in the lead up to Welcome Home, you could tell that they were doing everything they could to re-establish their country credentials. Zac Brown himself contributed a song to Dave Cobb's Southern Family compilation, which I still hold is the best album of 2016. It's a would-be classic. You all need to hear it if you haven't. And apparently, they connected so well that Dave Cobb was pulled on to produce this entire new album. And despite this reassuring step, I was still, well, a little concerned. I wasn't against Zac Brown experimenting in the first place. He had stuck the landing a fair few times. I just wanted the cohesion to be there and the songwriting to connect. But hey, if we're gonna get a solid, grounded country album, this is something that the Zac Brown Band can do well. They've done it before in the past. So, okay, what do we get with this? Well, honestly, I have to say, I'm a little bit underwhelmed by this project. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but the more listens I gave Welcome Home, the more I was utterly convinced that it was a very safe project. The sort of album that's used to placate some country fans without really challenging them or stepping into territory that the Zac Brown Band hasn't touched on before. Something even more than you might think, but yeah, we'll get to it. It's also the sort of album that doesn't really give me a lot to say either. Sure, it's pleasant, but it's also generally kind of tepid and not close to hitting the heights for which they are capable. Uncaged, this is definitely not. But hey, look, it's important to stress that, as a whole, the Zac Brown Band are still a really compelling country group. Warm acoustic guitar, solid bass lines, a little bit of piano, some beautiful fiddle work, sounds great, touches of organ when it's needed, and Zac Brown's huge voice to back it all up. And look, it's really easy to get sucked in by the purity of that. It's familiar, it's comforting, especially as you can tell that Dave Cobb is letting all that warm richness swell through his production, which is about the only distinct contribution he makes to this record, outside of giving the fiddle some beautiful tone on songs like Long Haul. But if you're coming in expecting any of the rough edges that occasionally have cropped up on previous albums, maybe a little bit of a rock side, or even the dramatic swell that anchored some of their most powerful songs like Colder Weather, well, you're not gonna get it. And the level of polish on display doesn't exactly help make songs like Family Table feel any less schmaltzy, or the blocky percussion buried inside Start Over sound anything less like one of the least inspired island songs that the Zac Brown Band have ever cut, or how the melody line of the hook of Your Majesty might have been imported straight out of Homegrown, and they've done this before, repeating melody lines. Now, that's not saying that there aren't good songs here. The cover of John Preen's All the Best, it's passable, even if that odd little tap that they let through gets kind of distracting for me. My Old Man, the lead-off single, it's got real weight in the chorus harmonies. The song did grow on me, and Two Places at One Time is easily the best song here, with a good hook and one of the richer vocal arrangements. It has some power to it. But as I referenced when I covered Chris Stapleton, when you're releasing a 10-song record that's barely over a half hour, you don't exactly exactly have room for filler, and there are songs there that definitely tread in that direction. But if you're gonna highlight where this becomes an issue, it's in a lot of the songwriting and lyrics. And look, as much as I really do love Southern Family, I own it on vinyl for God's sake, I think Zac Brown might have kind of missed the point of that album beyond his collaboration. Sure, it told those down-home, family-centric stories, but the larger themes of the album were focused on darkness and death in that family, and trying to find a reconciliation with that fact. It had a lot of real weight to it because those deaths and family dysfunction was described in the sense of grounded reality, whereas with Welcome Home, Zac Brown seems much more driven to capture an idealized down-home family experience, and paradoxically, it feels a lot less relatable to me. Here's how broadly populist that Zac Brown is aiming. When calling back to the roots that he feels whenever he plays to keep him grounded on the song aptly titled Roots, the song he uses to bring people together, it's not a country song, it's Don't Stop Believing by Journey. Seriously. Two places at one time, it at least reflects a little wistful longing to be both at home and on the road, although Dirk Bentley's Damn These Dreams and Brad Paisley's Southern Comfort Zone both did this with more of the concept, but he's also immediately followed by Family Table. And again, given the Southern Family connection through the producer and the obvious thematic inspiration, it's hard for me to not compare this with Jamie Johnson's Mama's Table, which is a far better song. It had a lot more going on to it. Then there are the two tributes to his father, and I gotta say, at least My Old Man had some resonance opposite all the flag-waving unreal thing, because whiskey, songs, and women ain't real if they ain't from America. And I haven't even gotten to the songs about women on this album. I mean, sure, long haul, he's committing to the long term despite his own failings, and Your Majesty is sincere if a tad hyperbolic for a love song, but when you follow that with Trying to Drive, which, yes, anyone who has heard the Zac Brown Band's live album will know this is an old song from back in 2010, which is another reason I'm not sure why it's on this album. And yeah, I dig the fiddle, I dig the rougher electric guitar pickup against the organ, and Aslan's slight rasp opposite Zac Brown, it works pretty well, but it's a song about the couple wrestling for the wheel to drive the relationship forward, which implies that only one person has to run it and the other gets to the side. Well, outside of how the second verse makes the implication pretty heavy that it's the guy who's taking over the control of the relationship because the girl is just out of touch, I really think a song like this needed more details to stick the landing, feel a little bit more balanced from both sides. But that's part of the problem. Outside of broad sketches, on the majority of these songs, we don't really get those details. And when we do, like on Start Over, it only serves to highlight a dead relationship that no beach vacation with all the Corona and weed in the world is gonna revive. This is borderline Rupert Holmes' Pina Colada song, Clueless. But look, again, this isn't a bad album. But what's more galling to me is that it's not really all that memorable or interesting to go back over. And I know that the Zac Brown Band are capable of better than this, even it's pretty traditional country music. Uncaged was easily one of the best country albums of 2012, I'll say it again. And they've churned out some fantastic singles. I still sing at country karaoke to this day. And again, Jekyll and Hyde may have been a mess, but it at least had character. It took some chances and arguably had some better cuts. This doesn't get there, and combined with the flagrant recycling of melodies, I can't say this is more than just decent, netting in a strong 6 out of 10 and a recommendation pretty much just for fans. But Zac Brown Band fans, we've heard nearly all of this done before and done better, so I take a few decent cuts and just move on. If this is the country playcation that you want, you'll enjoy it, have fun. But I know that the Zac Brown Band, they've got the potential, they can do better than this. And frankly, I want to hear that album. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Zac Brown Band fans, I know what you're thinking. Believe me, I want to love this. I loved Uncaged, one of the best albums of that year, but this isn't doing it for me. But you guys want to tell me how wrong I am, the poll is right there. And if y'all want to support the band, you can buy the album. That's in the description below. The link's there. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get more involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right there. 3 times a week, you guys get to vote on records on my schedule, and once per week, you guys get to add records or even movies to my schedule if you're in the higher tiers. More details right there, but until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.
I've seen